I have announced effective immediately, we will draw down 700 people effective today.
700 drawdown, okay, I see it's a positive step, but we need 2 more steps and get them out of here completely.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the Senate hearing on the safety of self-driving cars to border czar Tom Homan announcing the removal of 700 ICE agents. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines from the day. Fulton County, Georgia is calling for the FBI to return all of the 2020 election ballots it seized. Last week, FBI agents stormed into the Fulton County election headquarters. They seized ballots, voter rolls, and electronic ballot images from the 2020 election. So far, the agency has not commented on why they were seized. Trump and his allies have repeatedly alleged, without evidence, that widespread voter fraud happened in Fulton County. Trump lost Georgia in the 2020 election to Democrat Joe Biden, a result that has been upheld through recounts, audits, and court challenges. The partial government shutdown may be over, but major changes to immigration enforcement are still up in the air. The legislation that Trump signed Tuesday funds almost all government agencies through September, except for the Department of Homeland Security. Democrats say changes need to happen after the killings of 2 U.S. citizens in Minnesota.
The American people want to see the mask come off. The American people want to see body cameras turned on and mandated. The American people want to see judicial warrants before ICE or DHS officers can storm homes.
To reach a funding deal or risk a potential DHS shutdown. That includes TSA and FEMA. 8 more federal prosecutors are now set to resign in Minnesota. Officials say they are angry over the handlings of the shooting deaths of ICU nurse Alex Preddy and mother of 3, Renee Good. This comes after 6 other prosecutors left last month due to mounting pressure from the DOJ to investigate Renee Good's widow. And hundreds of immigration officers are leaving Minnesota as part of a drawdown of force announced by the Trump administration this morning. The president's border czar says he's pulling back 700 ICE and Border Patrol officers from the Minneapolis area, but 2,000 others will remain in the Twin Cities. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra is live in our D.C. newsroom. And Patrick, this is the first major reduction in boots on the ground since the immigration surge began in December. But like we just mentioned, there are still plenty of agents on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. But Tom Homan saying, and that's the border czar, that 700 Border Patrol and ICE officers are leaving the area immediately. And this really would be the biggest reduction in this immigration surge in the Twin Cities that, of course, began in December. Homan says there are a couple reasons for this drawdown. The first is that there are simply fewer undocumented immigrants to actually go and arrest. He says that they have really brought down the numbers of targets that they need to go after. But the second thing is, he says that they have seen increased cooperation with state and local leaders, particularly sheriff's offices in charge of the jails there. He says he's gotten new commitments for these sheriffs to actually call up the federal government when they have undocumented immigrants locked up and say, hey, we've got this person, do you want to come pick them up? And to actually have an arrangement where they are picked up from the jail rather than let back out on the streets. That is something that I'm trying to confirm right now with these actual sheriffs, because this has been a huge bone of contention between the federal government and state and local leaders. A lot of these state and local leaders have actually been elected and campaigned on not cooperating with ICE, saying that that's the federal government's job, that their job is to make sure the streets are safe from crime. So is this actually something that has changed? Time will tell on that. Homan also making news saying that they're going to be changing some of their tactics and focusing on targeted enforcement. He's talking about going after known criminals, people that he says are either national security threats or have other criminal backgrounds, rather than simply going after anybody that they can find. This would be a huge departure in some of these scenes that we've seen play out in Minneapolis and the surrounding areas, where it appeared Customs and Border Patrol and ICE officers were simply going after anybody that they suspected might be an undocumented immigrant. This is Homan talking a little bit about this change of course.
We're doing targeted enforcement operation. When we leave this building, we know who we're looking for, where we're most likely to find them, what their immigration record is, what their criminal record is. But as we continue to be forced in the communities, when we go to arrest that criminal target, if we find an illegal alien there, they're coming. We're not going to turn a blind eye to illegal immigration.
So implicit there is that there will still be arrests of immigrants suspected to be undocumented that don't have those criminal records. The Trump administration always saying that they have been focused on the worst of the worst, but when you're on the ground in Minneapolis and you talk to folks, of course, we've been doing stories about people that have been arrested that perhaps were asylum seekers, people that didn't have those criminal backgrounds. So we'll have to see how all of this plays out. But again, 700 fewer people on the ground, a mix of both ICE agents and Customs and Border Patrol, but that still leaves 2,000 agents there in Minneapolis. That is still much, much more than the usual number of 150 that you might see on the ground there, Holly.
And so, Patrick, then when might we see further reductions in officers on the ground? I mean, Tom Homan did say that he was pleased at how relationship was going with local and state officials there, but he really didn't put a timeline on this, did he?
No, he really didn't. In fact, he didn't give any sort of indication as to whether there might be a deadline to take people away beyond that 700 number that he gave. Interestingly, his focus right now on that question is on the protesters, saying that it will take a reduction in people protesting ICE and blocking the roads, impeding, that word we keep hearing, impeding ICE officials. But also he just said that rhetoric needs to be turned down a little bit. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 there, because of course a lot of the protesters say they want to go out on the streets and exercise their First Amendment rights because of what they're seeing ICE doing. ICE saying they are there because these protesters are protesting. This is how Homan described it.
We will not draw down on personnel providing security for our officers. I will not let our officers be put at risk. So we will not draw down on personnel providing security and responding to hostile incidents until we see a change in what's happening with the lawlessness of the impeding and interfering and assaulting of ICE and Border Patrol officers.
And something else, Holly, that I was really watching for is whether he was going to talk about this complaint that Governor Tim Walz has made that the state has not been involved in the investigations of the Renee Good and Alex Preddy shootings. Homan did not talk about that, and that's been something that the governor has really been pushing for, because traditionally the state would also be investigating these shootings, not just the federal government. In fact, we know that there is an Alex Preddy investigation that is involving the FBI now, but we still have no confirmation of any sort of investigation into the Renee Good shooting. So that remains a real piece of contention here between state leaders as well as the federal government. So now we work to find out what state and local leaders are saying about what Homan had to share this morning, Holly.
A lot more questions still remain. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live for us. Thank you, Patrick. Coming up on Today As It Happened, is a self-driving car safer than a car driven by a human? That's one question being addressed in a Senate committee hearing Wednesday on autonomous vehicles, where senators are grilling executives and engineers from Tesla and Waymo. Stay with us for Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen's reporting. That's after the break. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
we need to evolve some of the standards that apply to human-driven vehicles. A lot of the accessibility challenges that Senator Duckworth was talking about, these are ones because we are trying to adapt to rules and regulations that were written when it was only contemplated that a human would be the one driving the vehicle. That's no longer the case. Now an autonomous vehicle can do the driving. We need to evolve a lot of those standards.
Waymo and Tesla are facing questions from lawmakers on Capitol Hill today. The scrutiny is over the tech giants coming after a series of troubling incidents on public roads. The big question is really, is this technology safe? Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us now live from our D.C. newsroom. And Steph, you've been monitoring today's hearing. What are the key points we have learned from what's happening?
Hey, Holly, good afternoon. Well, there certainly is a bipartisan desire in this Senate Commerce Committee hearing to take some kind of federal action when it comes to autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars. The laws and the regulations that the country has today just have not kept up with the development of technology, and we've seen that in multiple other areas where social media, for example, advanced faster than the laws and Congress were able to keep up with it. So currently there's a state-by-state patchwork of what states do and don't allow self-driving cars and to what level. So these lawmakers really want the United States to be a global leader in autonomous vehicles. They want the U.S. to set the standards and set the baseline for the world, instead of those standards being set by example, our chief competitor, international competitor, China, in this arena. But there's a lot of really big excitement about the benefits of autonomous vehicles. They talk about it being a game changer when you're talking about drunk driving or distracted driving. A car's not drunk. A car's not going to get distracted. And senators have stressed the improved accessibility for maybe people with disability or for the elderly who still want to maintain that independence of having a car. And the Tesla safety official testifying today said that the next giant step in reducing traffic deaths is going to be implementing self-driving cars. Take a listen.
I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the next big jump we have in reducing that number from 40,000 to hopefully a day where it's zero is autonomous driving. Simply put, an autonomous driver, the system and the computer that operates it doesn't sleep, doesn't blink, and doesn't get tired.
So there's a lot of potential in using self-driving cars, Holly, but lawmakers know they need to take some action. The question is, what exactly is that action going to be? And that's part of what they're trying to get at in this hearing.
And Steph, what happens now after the hearing? So could there be fines or punishments perhaps for these automakers if it's determined that they need to improve on safety?
So liability was a question that has been asked in this hearing. It was Senator Cantwell, the Democratic ranking member on the committee, asking about, if one of these autonomous vehicles gets in a crash, who is liable? Does the company take over that liability the same way that a driver would in a, traditionally driven, human-caused crash? So liability is an issue that lawmakers are considering and making sure that it is the autonomous vehicle that is potentially responsible if there is any kind of crash. But there's a lot of different elements and, what the manufacturing requirements are, what the safety requirements are, how often do these cars need to be maintained or go through any kind of state or federal check. All these things are on the table, but the current AVs on the road, the officials testifying today, they've been designed based on federal rules that were written decades ago, long before self-driving cars were even a reality or possibility. So it sounds like there's a lot of change that needs to be made specifically to make self-driving cars a reality for Americans.
And the story continues. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen live for us. Thanks, Steph. Just ahead on Today as It Happened. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein have reached a deal with the Justice Department amid an outcry over unredacted images and personal information surfacing in the recent release of documents related to the disgraced financier. Scripps News reporter Alex Miller has been tracking this story from the beginning, so stay with us for her analysis just after the break. Thanks for staying with us here on Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
The Justice Department is quickly working to fix the redaction problems from its latest batch of files connected to Jeffrey Epstein. That's according to a lawyer representing survivors of the convicted sex offender. Many of the victims saw their names, their personal information, and in some cases, nude photos released. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York. And Alex, the DOJ was set to be inside that federal courtroom this morning to deal with that failure to redact the survivors' names. That didn't happen. Why?
Well, there was an agreement that was come to before this hearing had to happen. Again, the judge in the case essentially said he wasn't even sure what he would have been able to do, and he encouraged the parties to work together, and it appears that they have done so. Lawyers for survivors were asking for the DOJ website to be taken down in full if they couldn't come to an agreement and have all documents properly redacted. They want to see particularly this list of about 350 names checked. We know that more than 100 survivors had their names put out, but there was this list that was given to the DOJ back in December of 350 names that were to be protected. They want all of them to be checked thoroughly, and the lawyers wrote the judge saying that they have engaged in extensive and constructive discussions, and in this filing, they say, based on those discussions, we trust that the deficiencies will be corrected expeditiously and in a manner that meaningfully protects victims from further harm. And they are also asking, though, which we have not gotten yet, the court issue some guidance to the press and to the public, Dell, to make sure that we do not repeat the survivors' names, even if their names are public. They want the public and the press to make sure that the victims' names are kept private as much as humanly possible.
Alex, while we were on the air yesterday live, the president said that it is time for the country to move on. I'm not concerned, but curious what the reaction on Capitol Hill has been like.
I think there's a realization here that this is not going away on both sides of the aisle. You have someone like a Congresswoman Nancy Mace who is saying that she wants to see people held accountable, saying that net worth doesn't matter. You have Congressman Tim Burchett, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, which is investigating the FBI's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and into Ghislaine Maxwell, saying that he doesn't think this is ever going to be something that people move on from because it has really the heat has ratcheted up on both sides of this. And then, of course, you have Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat, who has led the effort to get these files out into the public, saying that this issue is not going anywhere. Listen.
I would warn my colleagues, if they think this is gonna be a gotcha thing,
right.
I think that you're gonna get spanked. And I would say, let's just stick to the facts. If there were laws broken, if they broke laws, let's talk about that. Let's stay away from all the hyperbole and all the craziness.
And that is actually what we're going to talk about in a second with regards to the Clintons. But what Congressman Ro Khanna said was that this just shows the comments by the president. He says how immature, venal, and corrupt the elite in this country are, that they're saying just move on, that these girls were raped. So he also is calling for the president to answer on the fact that he was mentioned in these files as well. And he says the nation needs to have a moral reckoning of how so many people in the elite were doing this for decades.
So, Alex, the House is still working on its investigation, as you just heard. It appears to finally have resolved the testimony issue with the Clintons. What's that going to look like?
Well, the date is still to be determined, but we do know now that on the heels of a potential contempt vote for the Clintons, that they have agreed now to testify. This is the third time that they will be setting a date, and Congressman James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, made sure to point that out as he spoke with reporters yesterday. Now, we know that there will be video. This is going to likely be, according to Comer, a closed-door deposition, but he says members of the committee would love for it to be a public hearing, and so there is a possibility here that there could be some changes here. The details are still very much being worked out right now, but obviously we know that the former president, Bill Clinton, was acquainted with Epstein, that there are photos of him in this document dump that we have seen in other document dumps as well. What the secretary's connection is here, it remains still a little bit unclear. But as you just heard from Congressman Burchett on this, he's warning his own colleagues that the way that they're subpoenaing the Clintons could actually impact the sitting president at a future date, since he is mentioned in this as well. And so he essentially was warning the Republicans that this could become an issue for them in the future.
Yeah, Bertrand saying what is good for the goose could wind up being bad for the gander. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller for us live in New York City. Alex, thank you very much.
Now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day.
It's now a race against time to try and find the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 72 hours. She needs her medication to survive. The Sheriff's Office in Pima County, Arizona is now reviewing possible ransom notes sent to TV stations, including the Scripps station in Arizona. They're trying to determine if those notes are legitimate. They believe Nancy was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. There are security cameras, but police haven't been able to access them. The sheriff saying so far DNA has not identified a suspect. Former First Lady Dr. Joe Biden's ex-husband has been charged with murder. Police say 77-year-old William Stevenson killed his wife during a domestic dispute at their home. Officers found her unresponsive in the living room. Stevenson is being held on $500,000 bail. He was married to Dr. Joe Biden from 1970 to 1975. She then went on to marry future President Joe Biden in 1977. Officials say a man is lucky to be alive. Seems he was trying to take a selfie but wound up being trapped in an icy pond. The Minneapolis Fire Department saying the 35-year-old ventured across the ice to get near a fountain with colorful lights. Well, that's when he fell through. Had to grab onto that ice to stay afloat. The department saying the man's cell phone was critical in the end, but not because of that selfie photo. They said he used it to call 911.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
As far as critical minerals are concerned, look, that's a part of economic prosperity for Ukraine and its future. This war will end at some point, and when it does, Ukraine needs to be able to harness all of the resources of their country to be able to rebuild it. Ukraine has tremendous economic potential.
Glad you're back with Today as It Happened. Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off.
Trump administration is looking to bolster its supply chain for those critical rare earth minerals. Those are the minerals that make up just about everything from your cell phone to fighter jets. Well, today the State Department is meeting with delegations from more than 50 countries as part of that effort to do so. Scripps News White House reporter and producer Jacob Gardenschwartz was there. He joins us now with the latest. And Jacob, what can you tell us about this latest announcement?
Good afternoon, Del. Well, as you noted at the top, those critical minerals really are critical. They're used in everything from our cell phone batteries to the turbines of jet engines to the smart chips that AI data centers rely on to give us all of those queries. And they are critical not only because of those national security and economic implications, but also because the supply chains, how it is that they can be mined and refined into those useful materials, are really at risk of disruption. That's the focus of what today's actions are all about, trying to combat predominantly Chinese influence and disruption in the critical minerals market. At this current moment, China controls about 70% of global rare earth mining and nearly 90% of the processing and manufacturing needed to turn it from the raw materials into things that can actually be used in products. And we've seen time and time again China flood the market with cheap goods when other nations are trying to engage in their own sales as a means of trying to draw down prices. That's what today's announcement is trying to combat. So, taken together what we understand, the Trump administration is announcing this new multilateral trading bloc that's going to try to agree and set limits for sort of baseline prices, agree that we will only trade with the nations that are engaged in this bloc. We will not buy some of these cheap Chinese products that are dropped in the market, and that's a way to push back against Chinese influence. Here's how Vice President Vance described this new pact.
The Trump administration is proposing a concrete mechanism to return the global critical minerals market to a healthier, more competitive state. A preferential trade zone for critical minerals protected from external disruptions through enforceable price floors. We will establish reference prices for critical minerals at each stage of production, pricing that reflects real-world fair market value. And for members of the preferential zone, these reference prices will operate as a floor, maintained through adjustable tariffs to uphold pricing integrity.
So as the Vice President described, the countries that sign onto this pact, assuming it moves forward as we expect it to, will all agree not to purchase some of these rare earth materials from China and instead abide by these agreed upon, at least base level prices for trade and commerce within themselves. Now, As you know, contrasting to a number of Trump administration initiatives, this has initially received some bipartisan praise on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers of both parties recognizing the threat of Chinese influence to the critical minerals market and suggesting that Secretary Rubio hosting this meeting was a welcomed development. That's a statement from Senators Shaheen and Curtis, Republican and Democrat, on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But the real question is, how will our allies respond to this? Like any global multilateral pact, this really relies on trust. And that's something that, at least according to some of our allies, the U.S. does not have a lot of these days. We have seen some really unprecedented foreign policy moves. The retrieval of Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, President Trump's ongoing claims to Greenland, wanting access or perhaps even control over that island. That's, of course, an area that has a number of critical mineral resources buried underground. And so it relies buy-in from all of these nations to not only agree to this today, but to really put it forward, put it into practice moving forward. Notably, while we know there were 55 nations that were present, expected to sign this pact today, Denmark, which maintains control over Greenland, was not among those nations. Other nations like the European Union, United Kingdom, top U.S. allies were there. So certainly expecting some of our biggest allies to participate, but a lot of open questions to see how this plays out over the coming months and years.
White House reporter and producer Jacob Garden-Schwartz. Jacob, as always, we thank you. He didn't even get a single word out. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Capitol Hill today.
He's also doing that.
That's when the heckling started. He was there to give an annual report on economic risk. He helped craft that big, beautiful bill, but its tax cuts on tips and overtime could add trillions to the federal debt. Bessent also talked about artificial intelligence.
The Council is prioritizing the responsible use of artificial intelligence to strengthen financial stability. The Council is working with public and private partners, including international counterparts, to enhance system resilience while closely monitoring emerging risks.
He tried to assassinate President Trump at that Florida golf course. Now Ryan Ruth is going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Ruth was convicted of aiming a rifle at Trump through the shrubs at his West Palm Beach country club. A Secret Service agent spotted him before he could open fire. Ruth dropped the rifle and fled before getting off a shot. Prosecutors say the 60-year-old spent weeks plotting the attack and has never yet apologized. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates defending himself against claims linking him to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In an interview with Australian TV, Gates called Epstein's emails about him false, denying any wrongdoing.
Yeah, I met Jeffrey in 2011. The focus was always he knew a lot of very rich people, and he was saying he could get them to give money to global health. In retrospect, that was a dead end, and I was foolish to spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him.
You've no doubt seen the allegations, including some of them from the last 24 to 48 hours. Are they true?
No, apparently Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what his thinking was there. It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I, apologize that I did that.
The problem is some of the things that he has sent and some of the information about other people that has come up in those files has been true. Why would he do this and say this about you, do you think?
It's factually true that I was only at dinners. I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
His ex-wife, Melinda Gates, is also reacting for the first time. In a new interview with NPR, she says his association with Epstein led to the end of their marriage. She says she felt unbelievable sadness seeing his name in the documents, adding the details revealed about her ex-husband brought back painful memories from that marriage. Coming up at 3 p.m., Alex Miller is going to join us to discuss whether the Justice Department listened to survivors' concerns for more redactions. We've all been there. You book a cheap flight only to get hit with fees that make it more expensive than the pricier airlines. NerdWallet analyzed the two biggest culprits, checked bags and seat selection. Most airlines charge similar bag fees, but seat prices, well, they vary widely. Delta is the cheapest for seats. JetBlue is the most expensive. The bottom line, if you pack light and don't care where you sit, budget airlines can still save you lots of money.
Straight ahead on today's It Happened.
the reason that ICE agents were wearing masks is because they were being identified, their families were being harassed, they were being harassed.
Where is there common ground that you can find here?
Republicans should talk to their local cops and their police chiefs.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
Iran and the United States set to hold nuclear talks on Friday. Iran's foreign minister confirming the meeting after hours of uncertainty about whether those talks would happen. The announcement coming as tensions between the two countries have spiked. President Trump has suggested the U.S. might use force against Iran over its crackdown on protesters, and the U.S. has upped its military presence in that region. Also, the United States sending a warship to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Keep in mind the Haitian government is set to transition to its new leadership on Saturday. It also comes just days after a federal judge temporarily blocked the administration's efforts to strip TPS, or temporary protected status, from hundreds of thousands of Haitians who live in this country. Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman joins us live. And Katia, why are these warships there?
Well, Del, we're hearing, of course, that several U.S. warships have been deployed by the Trump administration to the Bay of Port-au-Prince as of Tuesday. And according to the U.S. Southern Command, these ships were sent at the direction of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and as a part of Operation Southern Spear. Now, that's the ongoing military campaign that's included numerous boat strikes targeting alleged drug traffickers in the region. And the U.S. Embassy in Haiti posted on X saying that the presence of these warships demonstrates America's, quote, unwavering commitment to the security, stability, and brighter future for the Republic of Haiti. Now, beyond this statement, the shared statement of sending these warships, their arrival of these ships is also seen as a strong message and a show of force during a significant political moment in Haiti. Del?
Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman for us. Katia, thank you very much. A Supreme Court victory for the state of California that could have major implications for the 2026 and 2028 elections. The court saying the state can now use its new congressional maps. Those maps could flip 5 Republican seats to the Democrats. The justice is rejecting a last-minute challenge from state Republicans and the Trump administration. You may recall the court also earlier said that Texas could use its redrawn maps. California's Governor Gavin Newsom celebrating the ruling on social media. Filing for congressional primaries in California begins on Monday. On Capitol Hill today, Senator Tom Tillis says we need to stop talking about 2020.
I didn't find a single state leader that was willing to step up and say their election was stolen. So it's done. I voted to certify it. We need to move on. The president is right to, again, look at, we've got millions of illegally present people in this country. I've got no problem with trying to figure out how to have an ID. In 2013, as Speaker, we put voter ID on the books in North Carolina. SAVE Act makes sense. Nationalizing elections and picking 15 states seems a little off strategy.
The government shutdown is over, but there could be another one looming right before Valentine's Day. That legislation that the president signed on Tuesday funds just about every government agency through September, except for Homeland Security. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, where are negotiations right now over DHS funding?
Well, Democrats are expected to file a version of the Department of Homeland Security funding bill at some point, either today or tomorrow, outlining exactly what they're looking for. They've already made clear some of their key demands: banning masks for ICE officers, requiring the use of body cameras, ending the roving patrols, bringing back some safe spaces where ICE agents cannot go, synagogues, churches, schools, all sorts of reforms on that front. The big question is, how many of those are going to be amenable to Republicans? But ultimately, Democrats say unless they make major structural changes to the way that ICE operates, they will not vote to fund the department. And look, there's a very real possibility that come next week, Del, we could be looking at a protracted partial government shutdown for the Department of Homeland Security if they're not able to reach agreement on just some sort of funding or reforms for immigrations and customs enforcement. Take a listen.
Dramatic changes are necessary at the Department of Homeland Security with respect to its enforcement activities so that ICE and other agencies are conducting themselves like every other law enforcement agency in the country.
We need the Senate, the House Republicans on board. And if they're not serious and they don't put in real reform, they shouldn't expect our votes, plain and simple.
A lot of questions about when those negotiations could actually happen or who they'll be between President Trump expected to meet with House Speaker Mike Johnson later this afternoon. I'm told that apparently the issue of Department of Homeland Security funding might come up during that meeting. The House of Representatives, though, they're skipping town. This is their final vote of the week. They're leaving town for the rest of the week. When they return next week, it'll be a race against the clock, less than 5 days to fund the Department of Homeland Security or risk yet another partial government shutdown, Dell.
Nate, Democrats like Charles Schumer are in the minority, so what are the odds that Republicans will agree to their demands?
Well, look, it all depends on who you talk to. There are some Republicans who are optimistic about the chances for a deal there, but there are also Republicans who think that some of the asks from Democrats, namely the mask issue, is completely unreasonable. And look, you can hear both sides of the equation here. Democrats who believe that removing masks from ICE officers would just make ICE look like most other police forces in the country, where agents have to have some form of, physical identification on them, plus, a lack of a face covering. But you hear from Republicans, too, who are seriously concerned about the issue of doxing law enforcement and protesters who might want to make threats against members of ICE's family and the like. Take a listen.
The hard one is going to be the mask issue, because the reason that ICE agents were wearing masks is because they were being identified, their families were being harassed, they were being harassed.
Where is there common ground that you can find here?
Republicans should talk to their local cops and their police chiefs. They require basic standards like identification, body cameras, no masks, judicial warrants when somebody kicks in a door and terrorizes a home or arrests and detains someone. These are basic professional standards.
Del, just a reminder what's at stake. If they don't come to an agreement, if there's a partial government shutdown a week from Friday, what we will see is TSA employees, Transportation Security Administration employees, going to work without pay. FEMA employees, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, they could have to work without pay or be furloughed temporarily while the government remains shut down. So, look, the issue here goes further than just ICE or Customs and Border Protection. And the irony here is if they don't agree, lawmakers don't agree on a bipartisan solution, a bipartisan way forward to fund the Department of Homeland Security, ICE and CBP both have funding through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed by Republicans last year that they effectively do not need this outside funding of the rest of the Department of Homeland Security. So it's the Coast Guard, TSA, FEMA, those agencies would all suffer if we were in a partial government shutdown come a week from Friday.
Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed for us live on Capitol Hill. Nate, as always, we thank you.
The Super Bowl, the Winter Olympics, award shows. There are a lot of reasons right now why you might want to upgrade your TV. And the good news is that moving up to a bigger TV this year does not require a Super Bowl-sized budget.
Shopper Tomas Vargas is thinking big for the big game.
Next time, honestly, I'm going over 85 inches.
You're going to get that big, huh?
Yeah, the prices are not that bad now compared to many years ago.
Retailers like Best Buy are advertising steep markdowns, like 85-inch TCLs as low as $679, and up to $2,100 in savings on select LG OLED TVs. At Walmart, game day deals include a Philips 75-inch TV for $378 and a 65-inch TCL for less than $300. CNET's Daisha Milden says you'll find the biggest savings on 2025 models.
I would check multiple retailers. It's a really good time to comparison shop.
CNET found the top reason people upgrade is screen size. Most people now opt for 65 inches or bigger, so measure first.
And then see, when you sit about 9 feet back, does that feel comfortable for you? Are you squinching your eyes? Does it feel too close?
TVs are getting massive.
116 inches this one is.
And more vivid, as seen at the CES Tech event earlier this year.
These TVs will be able to help you see their legs in motion with the sharpness and clarity as though you were sitting on the side of the field.
The newest TVs won't be on sale until the fall. Meantime, save with solid budget options like a 50-inch Hisense for about $300. But if you have the room and the budget, oh my goodness, this is a 100-inch TV. Best Buy has some 100-inch deals down near $1,000, so you don't waste your money. John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
Both online and here on the ground in Tucson, there have been lots of rumors swirling about different family members potentially being people of interest or even prime suspects in this case. But the Pima County Sheriff saying that they have no suspects identified and there are no people of interest quite yet.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories that happened during the day. So let's dive right back in.
Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 72 hours. She needs her medications in order to survive. The Pima County, Arizona Sheriff's Office is reviewing possible ransom notes sent to TV stations, including the Scripps station in Arizona. They're still trying to determine if those notes are legitimate. Ford Hatchett from our Scripps News Group joins us now live from Tucson. And Ford, have we learned anything new today?
Today's been a fairly quiet day, Dell. The Pima County Sheriff not speaking today for the first time since this case really broke open. And there have been lots of rumors floating around about different family members potentially being people of interest or even prime suspects in this case. But the sheriff saying that they do not have any people of interest or suspects identified at this point. We're outside the home here where they have taken several pieces of evidence and sent them off for testing. That DNA and forensic testing already been sent off. And so far, at least, none of that has led to any suspects or people of interest, nothing turning up quite yet. The Sheriff's Department saying that they are done at this home for now. They've turned it back over to the family, but they say that more than 100 detectives from the Pima County Sheriff's Department are working on the case. We've seen the search and rescue team and a helicopter overhead at different points this week, but still, like we mentioned, no suspects identified yet. And here on the ground in Tucson, there are tip lines for the FBI, the Sheriff's Department, and the anonymous 8-8 crime program through the county attorney's office. That program alone has received hundreds of tips from all across the country. Some are outlandish enough to disregard right away, but the majority have to be sorted through one by one.
Look, I get it. People want answers. They have a lot of questions. But it's important to respect the investigation and to protect the integrity of that investigation. You can't disclose details that are later going to hurt that investigation.
And again, one of those tips that they've had to sort through is that ransom note that came into K-Gun, our Scripps news station here in Tucson. Again, so far at least, they have not been able to authenticate that note. And just to highlight the national interest in this case, there is a $2,500 reward set up by the Pima County Attorney's Office for tips leading to an arrest in this case. In addition to the hundreds of calls they've received offering tips into their line, they're also receiving calls from around the country from people just looking to donate money, trying to up that reward amount. Send it back to you in the studio.
Ford Hatchett from our Scripps News Group on the ground for us in Arizona. Ford, as always, thank you.
Thank you for spending some of your evening with us here at Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have an excellent Wednesday night.